What's up, Panda Nation? Peter Von Panda here. Hey, want to show you a watch that I really love. And it's one of my favorite watches. But do I love everything about it? No! I don't love everything about it. There are some things I actually kind of really bug me about it. But overall, this is a watch that I love making love to. Thought I'd show it to you. Kind of give you a little bit of a tour of it. First of all, as you can see here, it is a Ulysse Nardin. It is called their Marine Chronometer, and this watch, is probably about 5 years old, 5 or 6 years old maybe. And I'll kind of tell you the history of it and kind of share with you some of the things that bug me about it, because I think they're actually valid. And if you're buying one of these, it's something to keep in mind, because if it gets to the age where mine is now, it's kind of like maintaining an exotic car. Some of these things may actually cost you a decent a penny to kind of maintain it. So first of all, the Marine Chronometer series of watches, as you can see here, the dial is pretty simple, but it's really beautiful. This is, I think, what they call the 263 model dash 66 dash, gosh, you could like do dash 3 dash 62 or whatever. Basically it was kind of like the dashes beyond that were kind of the code for the configuration of this. And you could get this particular watch in pretty much any configuration your heart desired. Blue, silicone rubber band, black, polished case, stainless steel case like this, gold, rose gold. The face could be white, it could be blue, the numbers could be silver, or in this case like rose gold. I mean, there are just a million combinations, and in some ways that's really awesome, because Ulysse Nardin makes some watches in a style that you like, but you can get it in almost any color combo you like. So I really like this. I thought it really worked. It's a little bit outside of my kind of normal watch style in many ways, and so I thought I'd kind of show it to you, because I usually generally live by a few rules on watch collecting, and this one kind of violates some of those, and I'm okay with that. All right, so first of all, let me tell you a little bit about the watch itself. It is much smaller. This is the smallest watch I own that I wear than any of my watches. I do own some watches that are smaller, but I just don't wear them. It's a 41 millimeter case. Now, there's some confusion over the size and the measurements of this particular Marine chronometer, and that's because later they came out with a Maxi Marine chronometer, which this is not it, and that's a 43 millimeter case. This is truly a 41, and what I think actually is going to happen in the watch industry a little bit is there's going to have to be some different measurements. I know the lug to lug is kind of measured now, but I think they're going to have to measure bezel, and then case, and then case and crown, because basically I've seen this watch listed as a 43 millimeter in some places and 41, and if you go from this edge of the case or the bezel to this edge, it is 41. Now, if you include the little crown protectors here, in your measurement, you get an extra 2 millimeters, and so you can kind of get a 43 millimeter measurement. Now, it's not a 43 millimeter watch, and if you held this up to 43 millimeter watches that are truly, the bezel and the dial are 43 millimeters, you will obviously be able to see the difference. It's these crown protectors right here, which are nice. They're substantial, high polished stainless steel all the way around. And, they certainly do a nice job of protecting the crown with the coin edge. And then the coin edge on the bezel itself is very similar. But you just wouldn't normally consider a bump around the crown protectors as part of the case, because it just doesn't visually impact the size that much. So 41 millimeters is definitely on the smaller side of a watch I'll wear. I actually really like wearing the 43 and 44 millimeters as daily wearers, but this one wears a lot nicer, and that's because, even though despite its small size, it's because of what I think is the really, really thin bezel all the way around. So when you're looking at this, you can see the dial kind of presses right up to the edges there. You've got this big outer bezel inside with the lume, the circular pips at the hour with lume on it, and then lume on the hands. And because the dial is so bright on this one, on the blue it's a little darker obviously, but in the cream color here, it's so bright and it's so large, it takes up so much of the watch, it actually looks pretty good. I'll give you my wrist shot on it in a second here. And so I think when I put it on my wrist, you'll see that it looks nice. The other thing is you kind of get this lug shelf coming off of the case here, and because it's pretty short, you don't have kind of these long lugs that kind of also give the impression of, you know, a small case with long lugs coming off in a band. Now, the polished curved area, the lug design here is really nice. You have actually a screw bar that goes all the way through to hold it on for extra strength. You have it on the top here. I think it kind of compresses the look of the watch very nicely. Now, the issue here, issue number one, is the Wacky Lug Design, right? So what you have here are kind of like two really thick lugs and then this centerpiece, so the bands will attach with just the center portion of the band. Now, it's pretty strong because it's not a spring bar, and you have a bar going through here that gets removed with these screws here. I broke my fingernail, by the way, that's why it looks so gross. But it should be pretty strong, but the issue is kind of finding, you know, a replacement band, which I'm kind of in the works of doing because this one's getting a little old, is, you know, trying, because it's a proprietary shape, kind of like Hublot and some of the Bell and Rosses. You know, they use kind of weird, you know, lug designs, and so you're really stuck either having to buy a band from Ulysse Nardin that fits it exactly, or an aftermarketer that will make one. And that's always kind of tough because, you know, the small sales numbers here makes it tough for aftermarketers to make a quality product, a cheap enough price, and enough of them, you know, that there's a decent enough market. So let me give you some measurements. This silicone band here, the rubber band, I guess, is 24 millimeters across. The center portion right here is 11 millimeters across. So if you have this one, the Marine Chronometer, that's the size you're looking for in the rubber band. Now, that's a really tough size to find. And actually, I think it's, by Ulysse Nardin's measurements, it's a 23.5 millimeter across. So obviously some wacky measurements overall. If you are interested in replacing the band on your Marine Chronometer, I'm going to do some follow-up videos on some experiences I have as I try out a couple things, and we'll see if things work, or if I'm going to have to buy the band, a replacement band from Ulysse Nardin, because this band is $600. So just keep that in mind. $600 for the band, rubber. Now it's nice, it's rubber, but it has two titanium inserts. This Ulysse Nardin insert right here that's emblazoned with it, and it's articulating on both ends here, right? And it articulates up here, so it's kind of this double, almost triple articulation on this side. And then the insert here is titanium, so that's pretty nice. And as you can see, it's held up very, very nicely despite some reasonably heavy use. And then the clasp, the double deployment clasp, is also titanium, which is held up even though it's been banged around. Ulysse Nardin engraved there. This is a part, the bottom, which is kind of nice that it's on the bottom because it gets banged up as you touch things and hit things. But being titanium, it's held up very, very nicely. Now you have a double button release here on the deployment clasp. It kind of squeezes these bars in, which kind of press into this negative space here. So you have two steps. One, this will click in, and then you have a little lip there that this one will lay over and then lock everything in place. Boom, like that. And then you have to hit both of these buttons to deploy it. It's been very solid, very reliable. Obviously, titanium has lasted, you know, it says titanium right there, looks good. You know, the gray brushed color kind of hides some abuse, which you can see there on the clasp, but a lot of people aren't going to see that, and I have no problems generally, you know, beating up on bands and in buckles. I have more of a issue with damaging the case, which can be a little harder to deal with. Now, I should have probably brought something to clean this up with, but a polished stainless steel case, and as you can see here, it's kind of bowl-shaped. What you don't have here is kind of a rounded, outward rounded, a convex rounding of the case here. It might be a little hard to see. Let me see if I can show you there. You actually have a concave bowl shape. On my Arnold & Son, it's almost a very, very similar design, but mine curves outwards. It gives a more of a rounded effect. This creates kind of more of a bowl, like a boat bow shape, which in some ways is cool because Ulysse Nardin is famous for making marine chronometers, and in very true sense, the marine chronometers that sit on boats. So I kind of like that. I mean, it's, you know, to me, I guess you see what you see, and you see what you want to see, but it's, you know, I like that shape. You can't feel it when you wear it, but there's a flat backing here. We'll go into that in a little while too, but I do like that. It's pretty unique. thins out the bottom quite a bit too. I have my serial number on this side, high serial number, on a plate, which I like, you know, that's screwed onto the side. As you know, I love when you use that wide open space. It's going to be a little hidden because especially when you're looking at the watch from this, you know, from the top down or even from an angle, it's going to be a little hard to see. It's like enamel color filled there. Really nice too. And then a kind of a brushed plate as opposed to a polished plate and then screwed on. But I love that it's there. And even though this isn't a limited production, you know, if it were, it would say number 1 of 1/99. Nardin certainly makes limited edition watches. That's where it would be. And so you get to advertise that a little bit. But I like when they take the time to actually create an individualized plate for a watch, even if it's not limited production, just more limited in its run. So this is obviously deep into the production run here, which is kind of nice, but just beautiful. This, you know, the polishing has held up very, very well. Obviously, there's some places where it could be hit with a buffing wheel, you know, if you really wanted to be anal about it. The Ulysse Nardin, you know, I mean, it's still so polished. It's showing my fingerprints, which I can't, you know, I'm not going to be a white glove guy. That's not the kind of guy I am. You do have the UN and the anchor on the crown there. It is a screw down crown. So you can see right there, 200 meters water resistance. And so it is waterproof, and it's a screw down crown there. I'll kind of show it to you here. If I unscrew it here. There we go, popped out. Now we're in that first position. And when you're in the first position, you are winding the automatic movement. Now, I believe the watch of this vintage used an ETA movement, maybe 2892, I think, or something like that. But it's an automatic movement. It's a manual, or it's an automatic movement. You can't see it. There's no exhibition case back, so we'll take a closer look at that. But it's my understanding that this ETA movement was replaced later with an in-house movement, because Ulysse Nardin knew that ETA was kind of going towards only providing movements to their own brands, and so the Swatch brands essentially, and so they picked up, I can't remember the name of the company that made movements, and now they basically make their own in-house movements of various calibers, and they look a little different. You know, also awesome, great movements. You know, and the fact that this says officially certified chronometer, you know, is no surprise. The ETA movements are awesome. You know, I think it means you're basically within 4 to 6 seconds a day, which is a pretty nice standard. It's pretty generally accepted that the ETA movements will stay at that kind of accuracy. But you do have a power reserve indicator right here, up, down, and it's kind of like, you know, maritime type of gauges. And so you can see here, I don't wear this very often, and only took it out today to kind of give you the video, but we're less than a quarter tank of power reserve. Now, I just want to kind of spin this because as I wind it, you can see that power reserve going up, you know, even as you wind it, which shouldn't be a surprise. You know, I think it's about a 40-hour power reserve, something like that. And as you wear it, you know, it is going to add a power, but you don't have to worry about it going dead overnight, right? You do have some design or guilloche design on the background of the subdials. I think, you know, for me, buying a Ulysse was a dream come true because I've always wanted one for all sorts of reasons. As kind of a watch guy, you know that I like watches that people don't really know, but watch guys will appreciate. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know, if you were a car guy driving a Pagani Zonda, right? Everyone's going to know it's nice. They're going to look at it and they're going to be like, that's cool. But real car guys will know, like, oh, or a Huayra or something, and be like, wow, you know, active aero flaps and all this other stuff, right? You're going to really appreciate it. But the masses are going to like the Ferrari. They're going to be like, that guy has a Ferrari 360 Modena. Awesome, right? You know, there's things that are going to be more mainstream, and Ulysse Nardin is kind of more on the fringe. You know, and in some ways that's kind of, you know, that was intentional because they wanted to make some really great watches. On the other hand, it was they're kind of like me in that they were really passionate about making great timepieces, but they were terrible at running a business. You know, and so they actually kind of ran themselves into bankruptcy maybe a couple times, and because of that, they just never, you know, they never became like a popular mainstream piece. And I like them for that. I like timepieces, cars, watches, any other things that I collect that are kind of more niche and passion driven as opposed to being really mainstream and maybe a commercial success. And the Nardins are certainly on that list. So I really liked it. And that being said, Everything about this watch is super high quality. I mean, we'll take a look at that. The design on the subdials, it just looks great. You've got these outer railroad tracks on the subdials here, inked onto the pattern backing. Looks great. You don't have gaps, or you don't have poor printing that you might have on kind of lower end watches. 1846 shows the year that Nardin started. Obviously, we just talked about why it's an officially certified chronometer, COSC certified, which is what you'd expect. Even the printing on the dial here, and the dial is kind of an eggshell, but it just looks super nice. It looks super rich to me. You put this next to a watch that's a white dial, and you can just tell how much kind of more oomph and depth and richness that it has. And then even the things like the rose gold, which are applied to the numbers, and they almost look gold, but they're not. And sometimes I think, oh, they're just gold, but they don't really seem just like gold. But maybe I'm wrong on that. But I just really liked them. Generally, I don't like that, but in this case, it was such kind of a fine detail. I fell in love with it, because not only are they on the numerals, which are applied, as you can see here. Look at them. And the cool thing about them too is the detail on them, right? So if you look at the edges of those numbers, you might be able to see that, if I can focus in on it for you, that they're not just cut out sharp edged, they're all little rounded. So the cool thing about it is that they have depth, but they also have like a finish look to them, right? They just have a little bit of softness to the numbers, that catches the light, that kind of reflects it from any angle. The light kind of dances on them, and they look great. And I thought just a little bit of that richness. Like, I'm not into the Donald Trump gold plate everything, but in this case, the gold plating was very tasteful. It's probably the only watch I think that I have that has gold anything on it, and I really like it. And then the other detail is that the rings around these subdials have that same matching like gold, rose gold, and I think it just gives it a little bit of that antique kind of like old Navy style brass look, and it just that eggshell with that kind of metallic trim just gives it such a nice finish. I mean, it's like juicy. It gets me hot and randy, baby. When I look at this, I just think, God, that looks great. I mean, don't you? No? Yes? I'll give you a minute to think about it. Yes? No? I mean, if you don't, that's okay. I don't blame you for it. So, just looks great. Now, I guess I go back in here one more time. As you can see, the subdial here in the middle is, or the lower bottom, which cuts off the 6, is your seconds hand, and it's just a beautiful sliding hand. The hands are blued, as you can kind of see there as I dance the light on it. They are blued, and they're beautiful, and they're like brigade style hands, and just delicate. And not only are they cut in like a brigade style, but as you can see, again, they're kind of rounded, right? They have some depth to them, I can kind of get the light to kind of roll over them. So it's not just the shape, but it's like those little details where they put the depth in it. And it's one of those things that you can't measure, and don't put it on a spec sheet, but when you see it and look at it and really kind of appreciate it in person, it's one of those things where you're like, yeah, that's great. Any company, any Kickstarter or micro brand can put brigade style hands, but a lot of them will just stamp them out of, thin metal and throw them on there, all right? And they just don't look and have the look of this. Now, sapphire crystal, obviously, with a Cyclops magnifier over the 8. The thing I really like about that, and I'm kind of offset to the camera here, so I might not be able to tell you, but that magnifier is dead nuts on top of the date window there. So when you're looking at it straight down, it's not an issue. There's no issue with, sometimes they're off a little bit, especially on cheaper, lower quality watches. It is dead nuts on. And even some higher end watches, they tend to not necessarily be right on. Now, it's underneath the crystal, right? So it's applied to the crystal underneath. There's nothing, you can't feel it up here, which I love. You don't have to worry about banging it or scraping it or anything like that. And it obviously works. Look how big that 8 is. So it looks like it should be the 6. Now, one of the things that I mentioned here is that, I just said it cuts off the 6. Some people hate that, right? It does cut off the 6. That's kind of a limitation of where the movement has its mechanics. I don't mind it, though, because I'm glad they didn't try to, figure out something else. In the smaller, they also have the marine chronometers that are slightly smaller, and it wasn't an issue. The whole 6 could disappear because the the outer ring there kind of went right up to the lower part of the movement. But in this case, I'm glad that they kind of put it. Your mind doesn't really register it as much because you have that date there. You have a lot of stuff going on down there. But maybe it might be a little annoying to your OCD if you see that cut off. But it is the way of the world, my friend. It's how things are. But I think it looks, overall, it just looks absolutely fantastic made. Swiss made, right? And which is what you'd expect. Now, a tour of the dial is generally complete. The last thing I will say is you can see pips on the hour markers here, blue markings for the minutes, which is really Nardin's color, blue. And it's one of those colors that I just really love. If I were to buy another Nardin, it would probably be the Maxi Marine. I'd probably go to the 43 or 44 millimeter size if I could. My only issue there, and the reason I haven't done it or traded this one or sold it to trade up, is that Nardin, in my opinion, has a love or an infatuation with Roman numerals, or just straight marks. So when you go up the size ladder on their watches, they tend to either use Roman numerals or they tend to just use, straight line pips or hour markers, neither of which are really my favorite. I really love Arabic numerals, or I love really thick markings at the hour marker, something unique. It's not that Roman numerals annoy me, but they're really kind of 80s luxury. They kind of look very dated, even though some companies are using them very liberally today. Okay, that's my soapbox off. But you can see the loom at the hour markers on these circular pips. It has loom on the minute and the hour hand, and that is super loom. Super luminova is kind of commonly used, but this is friggin' awesome luminova. And I say that not because it's maybe, I don't know, it may not be as bright as tritium or something like that, but I have noticed that even walking around in the daylight, I can see it glowing. So it's almost something that I've never noticed on any other watch other than my Nardin, is that how bright the loom glows. And so I will show you a little bit of that. We'll roll in some footage. Let me see if I can roll in some footage not only of low light luminescence, but of also complete dark luminescence, because this is it's really interesting. If you're just walking around, you go into a room that's not super well lit, you'll notice the loom on this thing. And so I don't know if they're using something special or the way they're doing it or what, but it is bright. It's bright, and it's very useful, and it's one of those things that you'll notice. And it's one of those things from a quality standpoint. When you're paying for a watch at this price point, it's just nice to know that all those little details are taken care of. Okay. So now we kind of took a look at the band and all that. As you can see here, one of the issues that people will complain about is the way that the band fits. It's a permanent adjustment, right? You cut the band at these notches to fit it to your wrist. Now you have a little micro adjustment. What you're probably going to want to do is set it via a spring bar to kind of the tightest, so that if you cut it and it's a little too tight, you can use the micro adjustments. Now over the years, I have had to move these micro adjustments out, right? Because to the furthest out positions, and that's because the watch is shrinking. Just over time, metal shrinks. Despite me putting on some weight, that's not the issue. The watch itself is the issue. Somehow the watch is shrinking, and it's not the 20 pounds that I've put on over the years. So the watch band is getting a little tighter, and I will admit that one of the problems is, even though the watch band is still in nice condition, it's just a little too tight. And, poo-poo on Ulysse Nardin for not understanding kind of the mechanics and the thermodynamics of how watches shrink over time. But the problem is I can't increase the size of it, so what I really need to do is replace the band. Now, I want to show you, it still fits and it's still comfortable, but it's just I like wearing my watches just a little bit looser. Now, I just going to want to show this to you because, as I said, it's maybe just a little smaller than I would normally wear. Now, you might say, well, Pete, you have a full 7.5-inch wrist, and does this watch look comically small on your wrist? I don't think so. And again, it's mostly because, in my opinion, I think of that really big dial. For the size of the watch, the dial is the watch. And so when you look at it, you're really seeing a lot of dial. And I think the white dial also helps kind of open up kind of the perceived size of the watch. As you can see there, it fits on the wrist really nicely. kind of bowl-shaped case design. Makes it comfortable. You know, the short crown, you don't have to worry about it hitting. I do like the double articulation of the band, and it just makes it super comfortable. The rubber band is very comfortable, and kind of having a second piece in there so it really can kind of curve to your wrist is pretty nice. Well, I have a little sunburn, a little dry skin down there. And then up here, you'll notice that there isn't an insert up here. Now, on the Maxi Marines, I believe, there's a second titanium insert up here for, you know, kind of even more wrist confirmation features. But on the Marine Chronometer, the one that I have, it's only down here. So just kind of keep that in mind, especially if you're buying a replacement band and you notice it has two places for titanium inserts. You know, that'll kind of be an indication of which watch it's for. But on mine, it's just the one, and I do like it. It's kind of unique. There are other watch companies that do put like an insert down here. I think Nardin is the one that has kind of pioneered that, and when I see it, it's, you know, it's instantly recognizable if I see that on someone's wrist that they're wearing a Nardin. And I have seen a few of them around, but the funny thing is you don't see very much of them, many of them. But gosh, I think this looks great, even though I hate small watches, and I know a lot of you guys say this is the biggest watch I would wear, Pete. I wouldn't wear anything larger than 41 millimeters. Well, good for you, but I do, because I'm bigger than life, larger than life, man. You know, it's hard being a celebrity in my own household. Anyway, so that's what it looks like on my wrist, and I think it looks absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that I actually really do like is that blue, because it's kind of a dark navy blue. You know, it's not super dark, it's not like black blue, but it's blue, so you can actually wear this with a lot of things, and it doesn't scream blue, blue, blue. My Spinnaker limited edition Amalfi in the blue is much more of a bright, kind of a royal blue, and it's a little bit more in your face. This is more subtle, and the blue is really limited to the band, aside from the kind of the blue features of the watch hands and things like that, but no one's going to see that. So I think it looks really, really great. And the band just feels great, right? I mean, but I do need to put on a larger one, and so we will do some videos about how that's going to happen. So let's take a quick look at the backside here, and unfortunately it's a little anticlimactic that there's no, you know, exhibition back to take a look at the movement. But what we do have here is, I think, what is kind of interesting in that they have printed on the back all of their gold medals. I guess it's all of them. There's 18 of them. London to Lausanne, you know, from 1862 to 1964. So that's pretty impressive. If you have a resume like this in watchmaking, you know, why not advertise it? And it's a lot of material, so where are you going to put it on the case back? Now, like I said, you know, there's some other information here, 200 meters, water resistance, and whatnot. Now, you know, it almost, to me, would be awesome to have a crystal case back here, sapphire, with this laser etched onto the crystal so we could actually see the movement. Now, the automatic movements based on the ETA movements weren't, I don't think, are as visually interesting as kind of their in-house movements that came on later. I'm not saying that they're any better or worse, but you know, they have kind of some interesting elements that aren't in these particular movements. Now, I'm going to do something here that I normally don't do on my watch videos, is because this is pretty easy to remove, let's go ahead and remove the case back and take a look at the movement and what you get in this particular model watch. And I want to kind of point out what are some of the differences maybe to look for if you have this watch, because you can actually have this style watch in both the ETA movement and or the later models which had the in-house, quote-unquote in-house Nardin movement. All right, so we've got the back off the movement, and the reason I did that, obviously, is because there's no exhibition back, and it's kind of a shame in a lot of ways because it's a beautiful movement. Now, again, this one is based off the ETA 2892, I believe, and so you can see that it's got its rotor there, and, you know, somewhere we can find the balance wheel. There she is. And they do decorate the rotor. It says Ulysse Nardin right there. You know, and it's nice. It's nice looking. It certainly wouldn't be bad. You know, they've done a nice job polishing it up. It certainly wouldn't be bad to have that kind of peeking through an exhibition back window. But obviously, they're certainly touting their history making chronometers. And so I just wanted to kind of show it to you because, you know, this is what it will look like in these. Now, later on, you know, this UN026 movement is what I think they call it. Later on, when they used the movements from the company that they purchased, the movements look a little bit different, and particularly the rotor looks different. What they did is, I believe, what it'll look like is more of a boat anchor, so which is cool, you know, especially for a watch that has maritime kind of history, to kind of leverage that boat anchor motif and kind of create a movement that has that. So especially the ones with the exhibition back where you'll have that boat anchor rotor on it, or lobe. And I think in some cases even parts of it or maybe the whole thing is blued, so it really looks spectacular. But you know, a great movement nonetheless, and this is what it looks like. Unfortunately, we couldn't see it until now. Just 6 tiny screws to get the back off. And if you're going to do this, you want to make sure you don't adulterate it or get anything in there, and then you also want to make sure that that O-ring is in good shape when you're putting it back, not squished too much or you know, not able to keep the waterproof. And you can see here, you know, they do some decorating, some pourlage on the back of the case back there too, and says Ulysse Nardin down there, kind of laser etched on the bottom too. So that's what it looks like inside. Just wanted to show it to you because we couldn't look inside there ourselves, and this was a pretty easy case back to get off. So that being said, this is one of my favorite watches. You know, warts and all, not many warts, but just a gorgeous watch in my opinion. Even though it's a little bit on the small size, I just fell in love with the look. I always wanted a Ulysse Nardin. I just wanted a watch from a brand with a storied history like that, and I just wanted one that, you know, was unique in a lot of ways, maybe not super popular, and this kind of fit that criteria. On some things it obviously violated on the size and like the gold accents. Normally I wouldn't go for, but it is what it is. So, but I have no complaints about it, and I certainly love wearing this watch, and I would love to have another Nardin in the future. If you're going to buy a watch like this, here's where the problem comes in. I think these watches, I don't know what they're fetching. You know, if you get like a 2012 model, which I think this is, you know, you're going to probably look at, I don't know, 4 or 5 grand maybe used. New, I think it was a 11,000-ish dollar watch. And so, you know, the price point to get in a watch with this storied history, and this much quality and, you know, good looks, it isn't cheap, but it's certainly not as expensive. You know, in a lot of ways, I think, you know, the Rolex Submariner, which is going to be an $8,000 to $10,000 watch, you know, I think this has so much, you know, in some ways more to offer. That's just my opinion. Check it out. Ulysse Nardin, Marine Chronometer, Peter Von Panda. Out.